Welcome to War Bios, the podcast where we delve into the most pivotal conflicts in history, and I'm your host, General Biography. Today, we're going to explore one of the most significant battles on the Eastern Front during World War II, the Battle of Smolensk. This battle was a crucible of war, testing the mettle of both the German Wehrmacht and the Soviet Red Army, and its outcome would have far-reaching consequences for the course of the war. The Battle of Smolensk was a clash of titans, with two of the most powerful armies in the world locked in a struggle that would determine the fate of the Soviet Union. To understand the significance of this battle, we need to go back to its origins, to the events and circumstances that led to this pivotal conflict. The story of the Battle of Smolensk begins on June 22, 1941, when Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. The German army, led by Adolf Hitler, had been planning this campaign for months, and their goal was to quickly defeat the Soviet Union and capture its vast resources. The invasion began with a barrage of artillery fire and airstrikes along the entire Eastern Front, stretching from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south. As the German army advanced deep into Soviet territory, they encountered fierce resistance from the Red Army. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the Soviet troops fought bravely, but they were ultimately unable to stem the tide of the German advance. The city of Smolensk, located about 360 kilometers west of Moscow, was a crucial strategic location, controlling access to the Soviet capital and the heartland of the country. In the early days of July 1941, the Soviet High Command, led by Joseph Stalin, realized that they had to act quickly to prevent a disaster. They began to rush reinforcements to the Smolensk area, including fresh troops from the Siberian and Far Eastern military districts, as well as tanks and aircraft from the Moscow region. The Soviet Air Force, although heavily outnumbered, played a crucial role in slowing down the German advance, with bombers and fighter planes attacking German columns and supply lines. The city of Smolensk itself was a picturesque town, nestled on the banks of the Dnieper River. Its historic center was filled with beautiful churches and cathedrals, including the stunning Assumption Cathedral, which dated back to the 17th century. The city's defensive positions, including the high ground to the north and south, made it an ideal place for the Soviets to make a stand against the German advance. As the German army closed in on Smolensk, the city's defenders prepared for a desperate last stand. The Soviet 16th Army, under the command of General Mikhail Lukin, took up defensive positions along the Dnieper River, while the 20th Army, under the command of General Pavel Kurochkin, defended the city's northern approaches. The stage was set for one of the most epic battles of World War II, a clash of armies that would determine the fate of the Soviet Union and shape the course of the war. The events leading up to the Battle of Smolensk were marked by a series of key decisions made by both sides. The German High Command, led by Hitler, had chosen to focus their main effort on capturing Moscow, which they believed was the key to winning the war. Meanwhile, the Soviet High Command, led by Stalin, was determined to defend the city at all costs. As we explore the origins of the Battle of Smolensk, it becomes clear that this conflict was not just a simple clash of armies, but a complex and multifaceted struggle that involved politics, strategy, and ideology. The battle would ultimately be shaped by the decisions made by these key leaders, as well as the bravery and sacrifice of the soldiers who fought on both sides. As the German army closed in on Smolensk in early July 1941, the Soviet defenders prepared for a desperate last stand. The city's defensive positions, including the high ground to the north and south, made it an ideal place for the Soviets to make a stand against the German advance. The Soviet 16th Army, under the command of General Mikhail Lukin, took up defensive positions along the Dnieper River, while the 20th Army, under the command of General Pavel Kurochkin, defended the city's northern approaches. The German army, led by Field Marshal Fedor von Boch, launched a series of fierce attacks against the Soviet defenses, hoping to break through and capture the city quickly. However, the Soviet troops fought bravely, using every trick in the book to slow down the German advance. They employed clever tactics such as ambushes, booby traps, and sniper fire to whittle down the German ranks. One of the most notable examples of Soviet bravery during this period was the defense of the village of Solovyovka, located just outside Smolensk. a small group of Soviet soldiers, led by Lieutenant Nikolai Korolev, held off an entire German battalion for several days, inflicting heavy casualties and buying valuable time for the rest of the Soviet army to regroup and reorganize. As the battle raged on, the Soviet Air Force played a crucial role in slowing down the German advance. Soviet bombers and fighter planes attacked German columns and supply lines, disrupting their logistics and making it difficult for them to bring up reinforcements and supplies. The Soviet Air Force also provided close air support to the ground troops, helping to break up German attacks and protect the Soviet flanks. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the Soviet troops fought valiantly, but they were ultimately unable to stem the tide of the German advance. On July 16, 1941, the German army broke through the Soviet defenses and captured the city of Smolensk. The fall of the city was a significant blow to the Soviet Union as it opened up the road to Moscow and exposed the Soviet capital to the threat of German invasion. The human cost of the Battle of Smolensk was staggering. Estimates suggest that the Soviet army lost over 300,000 men killed or wounded during the battle, while the German army suffered losses of around 100,000 men. The city of Smolensk itself was left in ruins, with many of its historic buildings and landmarks destroyed or damaged beyond repair. As we reflect on the Battle of Smolensk, it's clear that this conflict was a turning point in the war on the Eastern Front. The Soviet Union had suffered a significant defeat, but they had also bought valuable time to regroup and reorganize their forces. The battle had also shown that the Soviet army was capable of fighting bravely and inflicting heavy casualties on the German army, even when outnumbered and outgunned. The fall of Smolensk on July 16, 1941, was a significant blow to the Soviet Union, as it opened up the road to Moscow and exposed the Soviet capital to the threat of German invasion. The human cost of the battle was staggering, with estimates suggesting that the Soviet army lost over 300,000 men killed or wounded, while the German army suffered losses of around 100,000 men. The city of Smolensk itself was left in ruins, with many of its historic buildings and landmarks destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Despite this significant defeat, the Soviet Union regrouped and reorganized their forces, using the time bought by the defenders of Smolensk to mobilize new armies and prepare for a counterattack. The Soviet High Command, led by General Georgy Zhukov, launched a series of counterattacks against the German army, aiming to drive them back and relieve the pressure on Moscow. One of the most notable examples of Soviet counterattacks during this period was the Yelnya offensive, which took place in August and September 1941. The Soviet Western Front, led by General Andrei Yeremenko, launched a surprise attack against the German army, recapturing the city of Yelnya and pushing the Germans back. Although the offensive ultimately stalled, it marked an important turning point in the war on the Eastern Front, as it showed that the Soviet army was capable of launching successful counterattacks against the German army. The Battle of Smolensk also had a significant impact on the German army's strategy and morale. The heavy casualties suffered during the battle, combined with the unexpected resistance from the Soviet army, began to erode the confidence of the German High Command. Field Marshal Fedor von Bock, who had led the German army during the Battle of Smolensk, was relieved of his command in December 1941 and replaced by General Günther von Kluge. As the war on the Eastern Front continued, the Soviet Union gained momentum, launching a series of successful counterattacks that drove the German army back. The Battle of Moscow, which took place in December 1941, marked a major turning point in the war, as the Soviet army defeated the German army and pushed them back from the gates of Moscow. In conclusion, the aftermath of the Battle of Smolensk was a critical period in the war on the Eastern Front. Despite the significant defeat suffered by the Soviet Union, they regrouped and reorganized their forces, using the time bought by the defenders of Smolensk to launch successful counterattacks against the German army. The battle marked an important turning point in the war, as it showed that the Soviet army was capable of fighting bravely and inflicting heavy casualties on the German army, even when outnumbered and outgunned. As we reflect on the Battle of Smolensk and its impact on the course of the war, it's clear that this conflict was a pivotal moment in the history of World War II. The bravery and sacrifice of the Soviet soldiers who defended Smolensk will always be remembered as a testament to the enduring spirit of resistance against overwhelming odds. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.